What if the revolution you fought 16 years ago came back to destroy the quiet life you built? What if your teenage daughter became the target because of the sins you committed when you thought you were saving the world? Welcome back to Depthline, where every story has depth. Paul Thomas Anderson delivers one battle after another, his most commercially successful and politically charged film, yet starring Leonardo DiCaprio, in a role that channels the Big Lebowski's philosophical slacker energy into a high-octane thriller about radicalism, fatherhood, and America's perpetual state of crisis. Shot entirely on VistaVision, the first major film to use this format since the 1960s, and featuring a stellar ensemble including Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Regina Hall, and Teyana Taylor, this 2-hour, 41-minute epic premiered on September 8, 2025 in Los Angeles before its theatrical release on September 26th. Loosely inspired by Thomas Pynchon's novel Vineland, Anderson crafts something darker and more immediate than a faithful adaptation, creating a satire that holds up a cracked mirror to contemporary America while delivering the kind of propulsive action sequences rarely seen in prestige cinema. The film opens without warning or explanation, dropping us directly into chaos. An underground revolutionary group called the French 75 is infiltrating a migrant detention center at the US-Mexico border in what appears to be the present day, though the exact timeline remains deliberately ambiguous. These aren't protesters with signs. They're armed radicals executing a military-style operation to free immigrants from what they view as concentration camps. Leonardo DiCaprio plays Pat Calhoun, nicknamed Rocket Man, the group's explosives expert who rigs devices with the casual competence of someone who's done this 1,000 times. He's paired with Perfidia Beverly Hills, played by Teyana Taylor in a searing performance, the group's fierce leader whose revolutionary dedication burns with religious intensity. Their romance unfolds in the heat and danger of their work, two people who found each other in the struggle and can't imagine existing outside of it. The French 75 doesn't just rescue migrants. They plant bombs in courthouses and politicians' offices, targeting those who oppose abortion rights and immigrant protections. It's terrorism by any legal definition, but Anderson frames it with enough sympathy that we understand the desperation driving these actions, even if we don't endorse them. This is America pushed just a few degrees past its current temperature, where institutional violence has become so normalized that radical resistance feels inevitable. During one operation, Perfidia encounters Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw, played by Sean Penn with unnerving intensity. Lockjaw is a sadistic military officer and white supremacist who becomes perversely fixated on Perfidia, simultaneously desiring and despising her. Their confrontation sets in motion a dark game of cat and mouse that will span decades. Lockjaw represents the institutional racism and fascism that the French 75 fights against, but he's also disturbingly human in his obsessions and insecurities. The revolutionary campaign ends in betrayal and disaster. Perfidia vanishes under mysterious circumstances, forcing Pat to go into hiding with their infant daughter, Willa. Many members of the French 75 are captured or killed, and the movement collapses. Pat disappears completely, becoming Bob Ferguson and erasing his radical past to survive. Fast forward 16 years to the sanctuary city of Bactan Cross, somewhere in Northern California. Bob Ferguson, still played by DiCaprio, but now transformed into a paranoid, drug-addled hermit, lives off the grid in a state of perpetual anxiety. He spends his days stoned, wearing a ratty plaid bathrobe and sporting a messy man bun that screams defeated hippie. DiCaprio leans hard into the physical comedy here, channeling Jeff Bridges's The Dude with the same shambling energy, but adding layers of genuine trauma and rage beneath the stoner exterior. His daughter Willa, played by Chase Infinity with remarkable self-possession, has grown into a spirited and self-reliant 16-year-old who's learned to navigate hardship on her own. She attends school under an assumed identity, unaware of her father's revolutionary past or the real reason they live in isolation. Bob has told her nothing about Perfidia, the French 75, or the enemies who might still want them dead. Bob's paranoia isn't entirely unjustified. The political climate has shifted even further toward authoritarianism, with Colonel Lockjaw rising through military ranks and gaining influence within white supremacist networks. Lockjaw has been invited to join the Christmas Adventurers Club, a secret cabal of wealthy white supremacists who operate with impunity. But Lockjaw has a problem. Perfidia bore his child during their encounters 16 years ago, and Willa is biological evidence of his interracial relationship, something that would destroy his reputation among his racist allies. Lockjaw hires an indigenous bounty hunter named Avanti Q and manipulates Bob's old ally, Howard Somerville, into setting a trap. The plan is simple: eliminate any evidence of Lockjaw's past, which means killing both Bob and Willa. The crisis arrives when Deandra, played by Regina Hall as one of the few surviving members of the French 75, receives intelligence about the threat to Willa. She manages to rescue the teenager just before a coordinated raid on her school, but in the chaos, Willa becomes separated from both Deandra and Bob. Suddenly, Bob's worst nightmare materializes. His daughter is missing, and his enemies from 16 years ago have returned to finish what they started. Bob is forced out of his drug-fueled hibernation and into action. He reaches out to the remaining French 75 members, trying to reassemble what's left of the network. Most are scattered, broken, or dead, but a few answer the call. The film shifts gears here, becoming a propulsive chase thriller as Bob races to find Willa before Lockjaw's forces do. Bob receives crucial help from Sensei Sergio St. Carlos, played by Benicio del Toro, in what many critics call the film's standout performance. Sergio runs what he calls his Latino Harriet Tubman situation, providing migrants with refuge and safe passage through Bactan Cross. Del Toro brings quiet intensity and surprising humor to the role, creating a character who operates with zen-like calm while coordinating an underground railroad in contemporary America. The chemistry between DiCaprio and Del Toro elevates every scene they share, two aging radicals discovering they still have fight left in them. As Bob searches for Willa, he's forced to confront uncomfortable truths about how much America has changed and how much he hasn't. The younger generation of activists uses different language and tactics than the French 75 did. They talk about trigger warnings, safe spaces, and gender nonconformity in ways that make Bob feel obsolete. He supports their causes but feels alienated by the methodology, recognizing that his brand of violent resistance belongs to another era. Anderson uses these moments to explore generational divides within progressive movements without dismissing either side. Bob's discomfort with contemporary activism reads as genuine character development rather than reactionary mockery. He's not opposed to progress. He's just painfully aware that he doesn't fit anymore, and maybe never entirely did, except through his devotion to perfidia. The film's middle section features spectacular action sequences that recall everything from Sergio Leone westerns to Steven Spielberg's Duel. Bob, still wearing that ridiculous bathrobe through most of the carnage, engages in high-speed car chases, shootouts, and desperate gambits that feel genuinely dangerous. Anderson shoots these sequences with visceral intensity while maintaining his signature visual elegance, proving he can direct action as compellingly as he directs character studies. Regina Hall's Deandra provides crucial assistance, revealing that she spent 16 years preparing for this exact scenario. She maintained weapons caches, safe houses, and communication networks in case the revolution needed to be reignited. Her scenes crackle with the energy of someone who's been waiting for permission to stop pretending to be normal and start fighting again. As Bob gets closer to finding Willa, devastating truths emerge about her parentage. Through flashbacks and recovered memories, we learn that Perfidia's relationship with Lockjaw was far more complicated than simple captivity. The power dynamics were twisted, involving coercion, manipulation, and the Colonel's obsessive fixation on her. Willa was born from this darkness, making her both a daughter, Bob raised with love, and a living reminder of violence inflicted on the woman he loved. When Bob finally finds Willa, their reunion is complicated by these revelations. Willa has discovered the truth about her biological father and struggles to reconcile this knowledge with the life Bob built for her. The film doesn't offer easy answers about nature versus nurture, or the sins of fathers being visited upon daughters. Instead, Anderson allows these characters to sit with the messy reality that families are complicated and trauma echoes through generations in ways we can't always control. The final confrontation between Bob and Lockjaw is less about action spectacle and more about ideological warfare. Lockjaw represents the worst of American imperialism and racism, while Bob represents the flawed but sincere desire for justice. Neither man is entirely right or wrong. They're both products of systems that created them and now demand their sacrifice. The film's climax unfolds across multiple locations as various factions converge. The remaining French 75 members launch a coordinated assault on Lockjaw's organization, targeting the Christmas Adventurers Club and exposing their network to public scrutiny. Bob and Sergio work together to extract Willa from Lockjaw's grasp in a sequence that's equal parts tense thriller and darkly comic action movie. In the end, Bob doesn't get to be the hero who single-handedly saves the day. Willa saves herself, using the survival skills both Bob and Sergio taught her to escape her captors. Bob's role becomes not rescuing his daughter, but accepting that she's capable of fighting her own battles. It's a surprisingly tender resolution that prioritizes character growth over conventional heroism. The final scene shows Bob and Willa together, battered but alive, watching news coverage of the exposed conspiracy. Gil Scott-Heron's "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" plays over the closing credits, a reminder that real change happens in streets and homes, not on screens. Bob tells Willa that the fight isn't over, and probably never will be, but at least they can fight it together now. One Battle After Another is Paul Thomas Anderson's most politically explicit film, a work of controlled chaos that somehow balances biting satire, genuine emotion, and explosive action. Leonardo DiCaprio delivers one of his finest performances, making Bob Ferguson simultaneously pathetic and heroic, a man who fought for justice and lost but refuses to stop trying. The ensemble cast elevates every scene, with Del Toro, Taylor, Hall, and Penn creating fully realized characters rather than types. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling us whether you think violent resistance can ever be justified, and remember, the revolution might not be televised, but it's happening whether we're watching or not. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next breakdown.